Hello everyone. So this is week 4. We are going to start with another new chapter, which is chapter 3, and we are going to start with another layer of the TCP/IP model, which is the transport layer. As I discussed in my previous lecture, that we are going to follow the top-down approach, discussing each and every layer in detail. In my previous lecture last week, we discussed about the application layer in detail. What are the applications and what are the protocols related to that layer. So this week we are going to start with the transport layer. In this chapter we are going to understand the principles behind the transport layer services. We have already learned that the two important protocols of the transport layer are UDP and TCP. So we are going to learn more about these protocols. So these are the topics that we are going to cover in this chapter: transport layer services, multiplexing, demultiplexing, UDP, principles of reliable data transfer. I have divided my lecture into two parts. So in the first part, I am going to cover until principles of reliable data transfer, and in the second part, I will cover the rest of the chapter. So let's start with this chapter. Let's first of all just talk about transport layer services and the protocols. So transport layer actually provides the logical communication between the application processes which are running on different hosts. What do we mean by logical communication? We mean the meaning of logical communication is that from an application's point of view, it looks like if the hosts running the processes were directly connected. That means the machines which are running the processes, they are directly connected. It looks like from the application's point of view, just like, for example, when you are using any application layer protocol, for example HTTP or even messengers, it seems like to you that you are directly connected to the receiver or to your friend. So this is what we mean by the logical communication. But in reality, the host may be on the opposite side of the planet. Of course, it's true. It's a reality. For example, you are trying to browse Berkeley University page. It's not here, the Berkeley University server. It's not in the Saudi Arabia. It will be somewhere in USA. So when you try to browse that page, to you it looks like that the host, the machine to which you are connected, or to the application which you are connected, it's quite near to you, but actually it can be on the other side of the planet, and it is connected through many routers and many types of link. Application processes use the logical communication provided by the transport layer to send the messages to each other, and they are free from the worry of the underlying architecture or the physical infrastructure. Now, if you see in this figure, here in this figure, we have the devices connected to the routers. Transport layer protocols are implemented in the end system. So transport layer protocols, they are implemented in the hosts. They are not implemented in the network core or the intermediate devices. Transport layer protocols are not implemented in these routers. On the sending side, the transport layer, so on the sender, at the sender side, the transport layer converts the messages it receives from the application into the transport layer packets, which are called as segments. We learned about it in the chapter 1. And in the receiver side, it reassembles the segments into the messages and then passes it to the application layer. So more than one protocol, more than one transport protocol is available to the applications, and we have two protocols which are TCP and UDP. Alright, so moving ahead, so this is logical end-to-end transportation. Okay, let's understand the relationship between transport layer and the network layer. We know that the network layer is below the transport layer. Transport layer lies above the network layer in the protocol stack, and the transport layer provides logical communication between the processes running on different hosts. Now, a network layer protocol, it provides logical communication between the hosts. So it provides logical communication between the hosts, whereas transport layer provides logical communication between the processes. Processes are nothing but your application. So transport layer relies on reliable and enhanced network layer services. So it relies on the network layer services. Let's consider an example over here which is given in your book. Let's assume that there are two houses. There are two houses. One is on the other side of the globe and another one is on the another side of the globe. In your book it's mentioned East Coast and West Coast. Now each house in a home has being home to a dozen kids. So each house has 12 kids. There are 12 kids here and there are 12 kids here. So let's assume this is East Coast and this is West Coast. There are 12 kids here and there are 12 kids here. So the kids in the East Coast household, they are cousins of the kids. So these 12 kids, they are cousins of these 12 kids living on the West Coast. The kids in the two households, they love to write each other, and each kid writes each cousin letter every week. So each of the 12, each cousin writes to each cousin letter every week, with each letter delivered by the traditional postal office services in the separate envelope. So each household sends 144 letters. So 12 into 12 is 144. So child 1 is sending to 12 persons, child 2 is sending to 12 persons, so 144 letters. Thus each household sends 12 into 12, 144 letters every week, and these kids can save a lot of money if of course they have an email, but they don't have email. In each of the households there is one kid. Now in each of the household, let's assume there is one kid, let's assume there is a kid X and here there is a kid there is a kid Y, or according to your book it's Anne in the West Coast and Bill in the East Coast. So I have Bill, let me write here Bill, and here I have Anne. Anne on the West Coast and Bill in the East Coast, who is responsible for collecting the mail from the post office. So let's assume this is a post office, because we know that the letter will go to the post office and from the post office they need to collect the letters. So there is a kid responsible at each house for collecting the mail and distributing the mail. Now let's assume each week Anne visits all her brothers, collects the mail and gives the mail to the postal service mail carrier, who makes daily visit to the house. So when the letter arrives at this West Coast house, Anne also has the job to distribute the letters to the brothers and sisters. Similarly, Bill on the East Coast has the similar job. So now if you see in this example, the postal service is actually providing a logical communication between the two houses. Postal service is just carrying a mail to this house and it is carrying a mail to this house. It is not carrying a mail from person to person. Whereas Anne and Bill, they provide logical communication among the cousins. Anne and Bill, they pick up the mail from the postman or from the person and they deliver the mail to their brothers and sisters. So from the cousins' perspective, Anne and Bill, they are the mail service, even though both of them, they are just a part of the end-to-end delivery process. So this example actually serves a quite good example in understanding how the transport layer is related to the network layer. So in this case, let's understand the processes. The applications are kids. Application messages that you send by using any of the services, they are letters in envelope. Hosts are houses. transport layer are AN and BEL, and network layer protocol is the postal service, which includes the mail carrier also. So it's a quite good example in understanding the relationship between the transport layer and the network layer. Alright, so continuing with this, we talk about internet transport layer protocol. So in the last week we learned about that the two important transport layer protocols are TCP and UDP. TCP is a connection oriented reliable protocol, whereas UDP is a connectionless unreliable protocol. So TCP is reliable in order delivery. It has congestion control, flow control, connection setup. So connection setup is required. Whereas UDP is unreliable. It's a connectionless. It's unordered. Services not available with these are delay guarantees and the bandwidth guarantee. These are not available with these protocols. Now let's talk about important concept of multiplexing and demultiplexing at the transport layer. So as we know, multiplexing, you might have learned the term multiplexing in your digital logic also, many to one, and demultiplexing is one to many. Alright, so what is multiplexing and what is demultiplexing in terms of transport layer and how it is done? First of all, let's understand what is multiplexing. Multiplexing means gathering data from multiple sockets, from multiple applications, enveloping data with header and which can be later used for the demultiplexing. Let's understand more about this multiplexing and demultiplexing. Alright, now we have some diagram over here. The yellow part represents the socket and blue circle represents the process. So multiplexing means gathering data from multiple sockets or from multiple applications, enveloping data with the header which can be later used with the demultiplexing. So let's understand how it happens. Now multiplexing occurs at the source host and demultiplexing always occurs at the receiving host. So always keep in mind, transport layer has the responsibility of delivering the data in the form of segments to the appropriate application process running on the host. So let's take an example. You are using a computer and you are using downloading some web pages while you are running a FTP session also and two telnet session also. So when you are downloading a web page, that means you are using HTTP, right? Apart from HTTP, at the same time you are running FTP session also, and you are using two telnet sessions also. So you have now 4 application processes which are running, 2 telnet processes, 1 FTP and 1 HTTP process. So now when the transport layer of your computer receives data from the network layer, so when the transport layer receives the data from the network layer, it needs to direct the received data to one of these 4 processes, right? So how it is done? Because the data which is received from the network layer by the transport layer, it should be directed to the correct application for the application for which the data is meant. So let's see how it is done. Now a process can have one or more sockets. We understood the sockets in the previous lecture also. Sockets are just like the doors from where the data passes from the network and through which the data passes from the process to the network. It enters into your system and it leaves your system, right? So if you see over here, we have a socket over here. So the transport layer in the receiving host does not actually deliver data in the receiving host. So when it is received, for example here, it is not delivered directly to a process, but it is delivered to the socket, because at any given time there can be one or more socket in the receiving host, and each socket has a unique identifier. So the format of the identifier depends whether the socket is a UDP or a TCP. So let's consider how a host, the receiving host will direct the incoming transport layer segment to the appropriate segment. Now each transport layer has a set of fields in the segment which have identifiers for this purpose. So at the receiver side, what happens? The transport layer will examine those fields. So transport layer will examine those fields, will examine that segment to identify the receiving socket number, and then it will direct that segment to that particular socket number. So this job of delivering the data in a transport layer segment to the correct socket is called as the demultiplexing. So the job of gathering data chunks at the source host will be later used for demultiplexing to create segments, and it passes these segments to the network layer is called multiplexing. Now transport layer is a middle host. So demultiplexing segments arrive from the network layer, and this is done by directing the arriving segments to the corresponding process socket. So if you see in this figure, host 1 using some process 3 is trying to send a packet to host 2 to the process 1, and over here the host 3 is using process 4 is trying to send a packet to process 2 on the host layer. So transport layer is a middle layer over here, or the middle host in the host number 2. So when the packet arrives at host 2, transport layer should demultiplex the segment which it gets from the network layer. Now after demultiplexing, it will direct the segment either to the process 1 or to the process 2 by checking the socket number provided in the arriving segment. So when the segment arrives at the transport layer, it checks the socket number. So based on the socket number, it directs the message to that particular application, because the processes have different socket numbers. Okay, so multiplexing occurs at the sending side, whereas demultiplexing occurs at the receiving side. Alright, moving ahead. How the demultiplexing works. Now host receives IP datagrams. We have learned in chapter 1. Network layer receives datagrams, transport layer receives segment. Demultiplexing always occurs at the receiver side. So host will receive the message in the form of the datagram. Each datagram has the source IP address and the destination IP address, and each datagram carries one transport layer segment. And each segment has a source destination port number, which we call as the socket number. So socket number is the combination of the IP address and the port number. So host uses IP address and port number combined together to direct the segment to the appropriate socket. Socket number of every application is the combination of the IP address and the corresponding port number. So let's understand how these are created. So connectionless demultiplexing. So how we can create with the programming. So datagram socket a package, by using this package we call it as the socket programming in Java. These are just for your information, the lines of code. We create an object of the datagram socket and we provide over here the port number. So this is another socket created and we provide some port number over here. So when a UDP packet is created in this manner, we are creating a UDP packet over here. When it is created in this manner, the transport layer automatically assigns a port number to the socket. So a transport layer assigns a port number in the range of 1024 to 65535. The port numbers range from 1024 to 65535. That is, and it checks a port number or assigns a port number that is not used by any other UDP port in the host. Java program can also create it can make it as empty, or it can provide over here the port number. So specific port number is provided. If you don't provide any port number over here, you keep it empty, then the Java program will, the transport layer will automatically assign the port numbers. Application developer writing the code were implementing the server side of a well-known protocol. Then the developer has to assign the corresponding port number. Now, when the host receives the UDP with the segment. So with the let's understand more. With the port numbers assigned to the UDP sockets, we can now describe the multiplexing and demultiplexing. Let's assume that we have host A and host B. Host A has a port number something, let's assume 19157, and it wants to send an application message to a UDP process to the host B, and let's assume the port number is 46428. So the transport layer in host A will create a segment that will include the message and the source port number, which is 19157, and the destination port number, and the two other values, which will be the IP addresses. And this segment will be passed to the network layer. Network layer will encapsulate the segment in the IP datagram and deliver the segment to the receiving host. Now, when the segment arrives at the receiver side, so the transport layer at the receiver side examines the destination port number. So when it checks the destination port number, when it checks the destination port number, now at that particular point, the host B can be running multiple processes and each having UDP sockets. So UDP segments arrive, host B demultiplexes each segment based on the port number to their correct application. So UDP socket is fully identified by two tuple constraints, which is IP address and the port number, which is always called as the socket address. So when the host receives UDP segment, it always checks for the destination port, and the UDP it directs the UDP segment to the socket with that port. And IP datagrams with different source addresses, IP addresses or source port numbers are directed to the same socket. Alright, so moving ahead. So if you see over here, this is the example that we discussed. Okay, so SP here is source port, DP means destination port. So for example, this process P2 wants to send a data message to some other host. Let's assume that the IP address is A, the IP address is C, and the IP address is B. So when it sends creates a segment, it mentions the source port and the receiving port. So this is the source port and this is the destination port. So when the segment arrives over here, transport layer checks what is the destination port and it directs the segment to that particular application. Now, after receiving the message, let's assume that the process 3 wants to reply to this client on the same process from where it received the application. So when it will send the message, it will put the source port as its own port and the destination port as the port of the process from where it received the message. So it sends the data. When the transport layer receives the segment, it will check for the destination port and directs the segment to that particular process. And same thing happens over here between the other client having the IP address C and B. Alright, so TCP socket is identified by 4 tuple. source IP address, source port number, destination IP address, and destination port number. So socket is identified by 4 things: IP address of the sender, port number of the sender, IP address of the destination, port number of the destination. Receiver host uses all 4 values to direct the segment to the appropriate socket, and the server host may support many simultaneous TCP sockets, because server may have many TCP segments or TCP sockets which are carried on at the same time, and each socket will always be identified by the 4 pair of things, which are sender IP address, sender port address, destination IP address, and the destination port address. Alright, web servers, they have different sockets for connecting to the client. Non-persistent HTTP have different sockets for each request. Okay, now let's talk about UDP. Moving ahead. Alright. So, UDP, User Datagram Protocol, no frills, bare bones Internet Transport Protocol. It's an Internet Transport Protocol, and it's the faster protocol. It's a connectionless protocol. Best effort service, UDP segment, it provides best effort service, but UDP segments may be lost, may be delivered out of order. Out of order means, suppose there are 10 segments to be delivered, so it may be delivered as 4. First of all, 4th segment is delivered first, then 8, then 2, then 1, like this. It is a connectionless protocol. That means there is no connection establishment, no proper connection establishment between the sender and the receiver, which means that there is no handshaking between the sender and the receiver. Each UDP segment is handled independently of others. So let's assume that there are 5 UDP segments need to be sent. Each UDP segment will arrive out of order, and it will be handled independently at the receiver side. Now, there is no connection establishment, which can add to the delay. There is no connection state at the sender, or the connection state is not stored. Small segment header, and it does not provide congestion control. But then why there is a UDP? Because UDP is a faster protocol, and many applications may not require reliable, but sending the data at a faster speed is much more important, like the streaming applications. So that's why there is a need of the UDP protocol. Alright, so moving ahead, our next topic will be the principles of the reliable data transfer. There are many applications which use UDP, especially the streaming and multimedia and internet telephony and network management. Many applications use UDP protocol. We are not going into much detail for the UDP, like its datagram structure or whatever. Now we will start with the next topic, which is the principles of the reliable data transfer. So what is principle of reliable data transfer? Now in this part we will actually focus on the problem of the reliable data transfer. That means there should be a reliability in the transferring the data in general context. So this is actually, you can say this is relevant, since the problem of implementing reliable data transfer not only is at the transport layer, but also at the data link layer and the application layer. So it's a general problem of central importance to the networking. So let's first of all understand this. It's an important in all application, but it's a problem in transport and the link layer. It's one of the top 10 list of important networking topics. So reliability in providing the data transfer is, when you are doing some research, it's one of the important topic, a networking topic. So before we understand this diagram, we must know that it is the responsibility of the reliable data transfer protocol to implement this service, and this task is actually made difficult by the layer below the reliable data transfer protocol may be unreliable. For example, below the application layer, we have two protocols, TCP and UDP. TCP is a reliable data transfer, but it is implemented on the top of IP, which is unreliable. So if you see, if we use TCP over here, below the net transport layer, we have a network layer, and the important protocol of the network layer is the IP protocol. IP is highly unreliable protocol. So a TCP, which is a reliable data transfer protocol, is implemented on the top of the unreliable, which is the IP protocol, end-to-end network layer. So we can say that the layer beneath the two reliably communicating endpoints might consist of a physical link, which is the in case of the data link layer, or a global internetwork. So we can view that the lower layer is simply unreliable point-to-point channel, because when the data is sent, the link, the physical link, the path is also not reliable. So we can say that the data, reliable data is actually transferred on the unreliable channel. So we will actually understand this diagram, and we will incrementally develop the sender and receiver sides for the reliable data transfer. So let's understand over here. If you see over here, the sending process has the data to send, and it assumes that the channel through which it is sending is reliable. But actually how the service is implemented over here, the sending side of the data transfer protocol. So here the sending side of the data transfer protocol will be invoked from above by a call, by calling this method RDT send. RDT means reliable data transfer protocol. Now it will pass the data to be delivered to the upper layer at the receiver side. So when it is sent over here on the unreliable channel, it will be passed to the upper layer at the receiving side. It will be passed at the receiving side. Now on the receiving side, we have RDT receive. So reliable data transfer receive. It will be called when the packet arrives from the receiving side of the channel. So when RDT protocol wants to deliver data to the upper layer, it will do so by calling the deliver data. If you see over here, deliver data. So we use the terminology packet rather than the transport layer segment over here, because the theory which we are going to develop in this is not just based on the internet transport layer protocol. So the generic term most of the time packet is sent. So characteristics of the unreliable channel will determine the complexity of the reliable data transfer protocol. So the meaning over here, the overall big picture is, we have some reliable data transfer to reliable data to send, but the protocols which are operating below the layer or underlying or the physical links may be unreliable. Alright, so this is what I explained you right now. So RDT, reliable data to send, which will be called from above, for example by application, and pass data to deliver the receiver upper layer, right? UDT send is called by the RDT to transfer the packet over the unreliable. So it will be called by the it will be called to send the packet on the unreliable channel. At the receiver side, RDT receive will be called when the packet arrives on the channel, and then deliver data will be called to deliver the data to the upper layer. Alright, so let's understand these RDT 3.0, which is a protocol. In action. So we are going to understand both operations with no loss, although there are RDT 1.0, RDT 2.0, but we are going to understand RDT 3.0, what happens with the operation when there is no loss or when there is a lost packet. Now, in this protocol we are going to consider, take 4 scenarios when the sender is sending packets to the receiver and there is no loss, there is a lost packet, there is a lost acknowledgement, or there is a delay in acknowledgement. So let's assume that sender sends packet 0 to the receiver, it receives the packet 0 and it sends the acknowledgement 0. After receiving the acknowledgement, the sender will send packet 1 to receiver, it will send the acknowledgement 1 to the sender. After receiving the acknowledgement 1, it will send the packet 0. So actually it revolves like 0, 1, 0, 1. So packet 0, acknowledgement 0, packet 1, acknowledgement 1, packet 0, acknowledgement 0. Like this, the packets are sent from sender to the receiver using the transport layer. So this was an ideal situation when nothing is being lost or there is no error. Now let's assume that, for example, sender has sent a packet 0 to the receiver, receiver has received and it has sent the acknowledgement. Now sender has sent the packet 1, but this packet gets lost, right? Now how long should the sender wait, and how it will know that it has been lost? So now how long the sender has to wait to be certain that something has been lost? Sender will wait until as long as the round trip delay between the sender and receiver, or we call it as the timeout, plus whatever amount of the time is needed to process a packet at the receiver. So it will receive for a certain amount of time which is required for sending the packet, receiving the acknowledgement and processing the packet at the receiver time. So it will wait for some time until the timeout to get the acknowledgement. Now if the timeout period has passed and sender has not received the acknowledgement for the packet 1, it will assume that packet has been lost over here. So now sender will send the packet 1 again. So this was an example of the lost packet. So before sending a packet again, the sender has to wait for a certain amount of time which is called as the timeout time before the sender sends another duplicate packet again. So now the sender sends packet 1 again to the receiver, and packet 1 is received by the receiver, receiver sends the acknowledgement, and then sender sends the packet 0, gets the acknowledgement. So sender has to wait for the time, for the round trip time, sending the data, acknowledgement and plus processing time, in order to know that something has been lost, right? So this was the case of when packet is lost. Now what happens when acknowledgement is lost? So in this case what will happen? For example, let's assume that sender has sent the packet 0, it has received the acknowledgement 0. Now sender has sent the packet 1, and now within the timeout time, sender has not received the acknowledgement 1 from the receiver. Receiver has sent the acknowledgement, but that acknowledgement is lost. We know why it is lost, because we know that sometimes router is full, there is congestion in the network, so router may drop some of the packets. So let's assume that acknowledgement is lost. So during the timeout time, the receiver does not receive the acknowledgement. So what receiver will do? It will send the packet again to the sender. So this will contribute, or it introduces the possibility of the duplicate data packets at the receiver side. So now when the receiver detects the duplicate packet, duplicate for the packet 1, it sends the acknowledgement 1 again. So after receiving the acknowledgement 1 for the packet 1, receiver sends the another packet and receives the acknowledgement. Now from the sender's viewpoint, retransmission is you can say it's a nightmare. The sender does not know whether a data packet was lost and acknowledgement was lost, or if the packet or acknowledgement was simply delayed. So in all the cases, the action is the same, which is retransmission. So implementing a time-based retransmission mechanism, it requires the countdown timer, just like we are talking over here, the timeout. It requires a countdown timer that can interrupt the sender after a given amount of time has required. So in this case, the sender will need to able to start the timer each time a packet is sent and respond to the timer interrupt and stop the timer. So these are the three things. Now let's talk about over here when the acknowledgement is delayed actually. So timeout is there but acknowledgement is delayed. So let's assume that sender has sent a packet 0, received the acknowledgement 0 for the packet 0. Sender sends a packet 1. A receiver sends the acknowledgement 1, but the acknowledgement is received after the timeout time. If you see over here, the acknowledgement is received after the time has out. It was not lost, but it was delayed now. So after the timeout time, the counter has expired. Sender has sent the packet 1 again. Now it will detect the duplicate packet. It will send the acknowledgement 1 again. So now there will be duplicate packet also and duplicate acknowledgement also. So this is what the retransmission is actually a panacea, or it is actually a nightmare at the sender side, because there can be it's nothing clear whether data packet is lost, acknowledgement is lost, data packet is delayed, or acknowledgement is delayed, right? So we have some pipelined protocols. So protocol which we discussed now, it was RDT 3.0. It's a functionally correct protocol, but it is unlikely that anyone would be happy with its performance. So it is not, the performance is not well, especially in today's high-speed networks. So the problem actually with this protocol is stop and wait. If you see, if you have carefully seen over here, the sender sends the packet, stops. When it receives the acknowledgement, only then it sends the another packet. So it is working like a stop and wait protocol. It sends the packet, stops and waits for the acknowledgement, then it sends the another packet again. So there is a performance problem with this type of stop and wait protocol, especially in today's high-speed networks. So the solution to this problem is simple. Rather than to have stop and wait in this manner, sender can send multiple packets without waiting for the acknowledgement. And if sender is allowed to transmit 3 or 4 packets before having to wait for the acknowledgement, so the performance will be increased. Since many in-transit sender to receiver packets can be visualized, this technique is known as pipelining. So pipelining means we have like designed a window. Window has a size. For example, 4 or 5. Sender can send 4 or 5 packets at a time. After all these 4 and 5 packets have been received by the receiver, and for all these 4 and 5 packets the acknowledgement has received, then the next packets will be sent. So this is called as pipelining. So sender allows multiple in-flight yet to be acknowledged packets, right? So 5 packets are sent, first packet is not yet acknowledged, so it has sent multiple packets. Range of sequence numbers must be increased when this type of pipelining approach is used. Sequence numbers should be increased. There should be a buffering at sender and receiver size, and range of the sequence number and buffering requirement depend on the manner in which the data transfer protocol responds to the loss. So if you see over here, stop and wait protocol, one packet is sent, the sender stops and waits for the acknowledgement. Then another packet will be sent, sender will be stopped and wait for the acknowledgement. Now for the pipeline protocol, if you see over here, there a certain size of window is defined. For example, sender can send 5 or 10 packets, right? It has sent maybe 10 packets. Now it will wait to get the acknowledgement for this 10 packets, then it may send 10 or 15 packets again. Now range of sequence number, can be increased. For example, it has sent first of all 5 packets, then it can send 7 packets or 8 packets. There are two generic forms of the pipeline protocols, which are go back N and selective repeat. Now these are an example of the pipeline protocols. We are going to discuss these two protocols, which are go back N and selective repeat. Now what is it? Go back N and selective repeat. Go back N. Sender can send N unacknowledgement packets. So N can be any number, 5, 10, 15, 20, 100. So sender can have up to N unacknowledgement packets in the pipeline. Receiver only sends cumulative acknowledgement. So receiver will not send acknowledgement for one by one. For example, if it has sent 10 packets, it will not send 10 acknowledgement. Rather, it will send acknowledgement and it will number it as 1 to 10. So cumulative acknowledgement are sent. But it will not acknowledge the packet if there is a gap. Sender has a timer for the oldest unacknowledged packet, and if the timer expires, it will retransmit all the unacknowledged packets. Alright, so let's understand this. First of all, we will understand go back N, then I will explain the selective repeat. So for example, there are k bits sequence number in the packet header, and there is a window of up to N consecutive unacknowledgement packets which can be allowed. So if you see, different colors are used. White means this is not yet usable. Blue means it is usable, not yet sent. Yellow means it is sent, not yet acknowledged, and green means already acknowledged. So acknowledged, all the packets up to, it can include up to some sequence number. So cumulative acknowledgements can be received, and it can receive duplicate acknowledgement. There is a timer for each in-flight packet, and timeout retransmit the packet N and all higher sequence packets in the window. Alright, so go back N, let's understand over here. Go back N. Alright, so in this figure, if you see over here, sender sends packet 0. For example, let's assume that there is a buffer size of 3 packets to send. So it sends packet 0, packet 1, packet 2 and packet 3, 4 packets at a time. So it has sent 4 packets at a time. Packet 0, packet 1, packet 2 and packet 3. Now it waits because the buffer is full. Now packet 2 is in between lost. So after receiver receives packet 0, it sends the acknowledgement 0. Now when it receives the acknowledgement 0, it sends packet 4. So if you see, packet 0 was sent, packet 1 was sent, packet 2 was sent, packet 3 was sent. So when packet 0 is received, acknowledgement is received, that means it becomes the usable space. So the sender sends the packet 4. Now acknowledgement 1 is also received, this becomes the usable space, so it sends the packet 5 over here. The sender sends the packet 5. But in between, packet 2 is lost. But sender, after sending the acknowledgement 2, receiver does not receive the packet 2, but it receives the packet 3. This packet is lost. So what happens at the receiver side? Since the packet 2 is not received, receiver receives packet 3, it will discard the packet 3. It sends acknowledgement again and again. So it sends acknowledgement 1 again. So in between, receiver also sends packet 4 and packet 5 because the acknowledgement for the packet 0 and packet 1 has received. Now when packet 2 out, the time out for the packet 2 is received, and the acknowledgement for that packet is not received. So the sender will send packet 2, packet 3, packet 4 and packet 5 again. Why? Because go back N means the packet which is lost, after that whatever the packets it sent, it will send again, although maybe those packets have already been received by the receiver. If you see over here, packet 3 is received but it discards. Packet 4 is received, it discards. Packet 5 is received by the receiver, it discards. Why it discards? Because packet 2 is not received by the receiver. So if you see over here, now at the sender side, packet 2 it sends again, packet 3 sends again, packet 4 sends again, and packet 5 sends again. So it delivers and sends the acknowledgement 2 and acknowledgement 3. So if you see over here, the packet that is lost, after that all the sequence number of the packets that were sent by the sender are sent again. So this is called as go back n. So go back and send all the n packets which were sent after the lost packet. So it actually contributes to the duplicate packets at the receiver side. Selective repeat. Selective repeat is quite better than go back n. Again, the sender can have n unacknowledgement packets. Receiver acknowledge individual packets. Sender will maintain as usual the timer for each of the packet, and when timer expires, it transmits only the unacknowledged packets. So, but here the time it transmits all the unacknowledgement packets. So this is the difference. So selective repeat is quite better than the go back n. So in case of selective repeat, receiver individually acknowledges all correctly received packets and it buffers the packets if the packets are received out of order. Sender will only resend the packet for which acknowledgement is not received. It will not send the packet, it will not send all the packet. Sender window, as usual, it has consecutive n sequence numbers. Again, it limits the sequence numbers of the sent and the unacknowledgement packets. So let's assume over here we have the same thing. White stands for sender view of the sequence number and receiver view. Not usable. It is usable but not yet sent. It's in the buffer yet. It's yellow means it is sent and acknowledged, not acknowledged. Green means sent and acknowledged. Now here in case of receiver, what we have, gray means it is expected but it is not received. Pink means it is out of order, and blue means it is acceptable. Alright, so selective repeat. If the next available sequence number is in the window, it will send the packet, and it will resend the packet for a particular number n, and it will restart the timer for that resent packet. For acknowledgement, it will mark the packet n as received, and if n is the smallest unacknowledgement packet, it will move the window, it will advance its window. Then at the receiver side, what happens? It sends the acknowledgement number n for the nth packet received. Packets received can be out of order. If it is out of order, it will buffer those packets. If the packets received are in order, it will deliver. Also, it will advance window to receive the next packet, and it will mark it as expected to receive but not yet received. Packet n will have acknowledgement number, otherwise it will ignore. Alright, so let's check this example over here. So let's understand, because both the sender and the receiver side, they contain the buffer. Let's assume that the buffer size is of the 4 packets. So these 4 packets are marked for sending 0, 1, 2 and 3. So at the receiver side, packet 0 is received. Now it advances its windows and 1, 2 and 3, 4 are marked as they are expected to be received but not received. So when packet 0 is received, it sends the acknowledgement 0. Now at this point, packet 1 is also received, acknowledgement 1 is sent. Packet 2 is lost. So packet 2 is lost. Packet 3 is also sent, and it is received by the receiver, but it is buffered because packet 2 is not received, packet 3 is received. So at this point, it will not discard it, rather it will be buffered and it will send acknowledgement 3. If you see, acknowledgement 0, acknowledgement 1 is sent, but acknowledgement 2 is not sent, acknowledgement 3 is sent. Now, since it has received the acknowledgement for 2 packets, so it advances the window. When acknowledgement 0 is received, it advances the window and sends the packet 4. When acknowledgement 1 is received, it advances, sender side advances the window and packet 5 is sent. So packet 4 is received by the receiver, it is buffered, acknowledgement 4 is sent. Packet 5 is received by the receiver, buffered, and acknowledgement is sent. Now packet 2, after the timeout for timer has expired for the packet 2, packet 2 will be resent again. So when the timer has expired and sender sees that acknowledgement for the packet 2 has not received, so it resends the packet again. So packet 2 is now received. Now whatever the buffered packets were there at the receiver side, it marks them as delivered. So packet 2 is received, packet 3, packet 4, packet 5, they are marked as delivered, and at this time acknowledgement 2 is sent. So when acknowledgement 2 is sent, acknowledgement 3, acknowledgement 4, so it will increase the buffer size of the window and advance to the next packet. So if you see over here, in selective repeat, only the packet for which acknowledgement was not received, that packet is resent. Whereas in go back N, if a particular packet is not received, not only that packet, but after that, whatever the number of packets were sent, all of them will be resent again. So this actually contributes to sending of the duplicate packet, and this is the difference between the go back N and the selective repeat protocols of the transport layer. Alright, so next topic is connection oriented TCP. We are going to discuss it in the next lecture, and I am going to stop over here. So thank you so much.